Well, hello and welcome along to a stormy evening and what I will tentatively describe as the final off-season manager special from the EFL Championship this summer. With less than 3 weeks now until the new EFL season and less than 4 weeks until the Championship gets underway, Leicester City have made us talk about a certain person again. Because yes, they have today announced that they have appointed Marti Cifuentes as manager. Not been a very well kept secret the last few days with work permits and other things holding it up. But he comes in, having spoken about him in the last manager special, which was of course QPR. You can find that in the eye above. On a 3-year contract as the new man. We're going to talk about him in a moment, but as always, we talk about the old man and the new man at the club. So we're going to reflect a little bit on Leicester since their promotion and since Enzo Maresca left when we were last covering them in a championship in 23-24. See what happened last year and what went wrong and what we can expect this time around. So hopefully you're looking forward to that. And before we go and get on to Marti Cifuentes, let's have a talk about last season and the last man at the club, Ruud Van Nistelrooy, because it's a little bit of a weird situation, wasn't it? Leicester City promoted as champions, although not entirely content as a fan base with the way that Enzo Maresca's team set up. They did win the championship with a very good points total and generally an element of control in their season. They went to the Premier League, but then Maresca poached by Chelsea. Steve Cooper, an unpopular man to come in, having managed rivals Nottingham Forest. However, a strongish start to the season left them actually outside the relegation zone at the point he was sacked after just a handful of games. Of course, unhappiness mentioned from the fan base and from within the club at Cooper's managerial style, and that meant that in came Ruud Van Nistelrooy. And if we're being completely honest, it's been an unmitigated disaster ever since, because Van Nistelrooy's tenure saw very limited points, very limited goals, and an awful home run that had not been seen before from Leicester City in their history. And it resulted in an 18th place finish with just 25 points in the Premier League, with a disappointing and in the end pretty abysmal relegation back to the Championship at the first attempt, joining the other two promoted clubs on their way back down. In the end, Ruud Van Nistelrooy was let go at the end of June, and that may be the biggest starting point that we've got to discuss, because despite having less than a 20% win rate and the fact that nobody really expected him to stay at the club, the contractual situation dragged out. Of course, we'll get to a little bit of Leicester off the pitch at the moment, which is as much of an issue. But because of that situation, unlike all of the other manager specials we've done this summer, this one has dragged on into pre-season. So we're now in a situation where the new man comes in, and yes, we're going to move on to talking about Marti Cifuentes. And the problem is, he's only got half of pre-season left to work with the team because they've already played some of their games, they've already done some of the training camp, and they've not had the manager in situ. So he is almost on the back foot before he starts here. But very quickly, to round off the old man situation, I still think the Cooper to Van Nistelrooy decision was a mistake. I understand yes, he's managed rivals and that. Hey, we were here with Rob Edwards a couple of years ago. I know he didn't have the same success with Watford as Steve Cooper had with Forest, but there is no doubt that Leicester City, points-wise, performance-wise and goal output-wise, got worse in every facet under Van Nistelrooy from a neutral point of view watching. But on to this season and to look ahead to the future, Leicester City appoint Marti Cifuentes as new manager on a 3-year contract, coaching experience in Spain, in the Netherlands, and of course in Scandinavia. Marti Cifuentes was most recently at QPR, where he did start very well, as we discussed last episode. So I know we're going to be going over that a little, but Cifuentes in his previous stint at QPR came in a very difficult position towards the start of the 23-24 season. QPR and Sheffield Wednesday, two clubs that were sort of marooned a bit after terrible starts to the season. And in the end, Danny Röhl and Marti Cifuentes became icons at their clubs for lifting those sides away from trouble. And while they did have a little bit of a stuttering year last year with problems in front of goal, maybe not the firepower you would expect from a club, and a focus on younger players and playing style, there is no doubt that QPR became a better side to watch, were better generally in a lot of matches, and Marti Cifuentes ended up with about a 1 in 3 rate with a 33% win ratio. So you have to say overall a pretty good effort. If we go and have a look at last season with QPR, Cifuentes, 53 goals, 63 conceded for QPR. They definitely had their problems in front of goal, and at the other end, they were pretty solid at times, but it was always going to be a difficult job with the squad they had. They had experience in defensive areas, but they had problems in both boxes. And particularly going forward, they just didn't have that goal threat consistently. In the end, paid to their chances of pushing a bit further up the division. Overall, though, there were some positives to take from that stint, and we'll carry that forward in a moment. But let's have a quick look at the Leicester statement and what's been said. A manager who joins on a 3-year contract, bringing, it's always in every statement now, isn't it? A modern, progressive footballing philosophy, along with a rich experience across a number of leagues. He's brought his assistant with him from QPR as well, Xavi Khan, and of course the chairperson and the manager, both delighted with the announcement and the fact that Marti Cifuentes will be taking his club forward. He's very happy. He's looking forward to getting to know the players and connecting with the supporters. And that is something, going back to what we said Maresca wasn't so popular for, and probably Cooper, despite the fact they were getting okay results. The issue is that Marti Cifuentes became very popular at QPR. Now, they were in a very difficult situation before, but he is someone that does connect with a fan base. So that potentially could be a positive on that front. However, for Leicester City, we've got to talk about where to go next season, because it's not just on the pitches, it is off it. There have been constant will they, won't they on the charges front. Which territory did they fall under last year? Both the EFL and the Premier League wanted to charge them. They ended up not falling under either bracket because of the way the rules were written. Obviously, breaking the rules in the Championship, but then got promoted, were into the Premier League. And now it's going the other way as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that front. I don't think there's much point getting too involved with it, because we've seen so many appeals, so many changes of decision. Go back to Everton and Forest in the Premier League the year before last. So it's too unpredictable to worry about. And Marti Cifuentes won't be doing that either. However, it is going to affect the transfer window, because Marti Cifuentes is inheriting a Leicester side that is weaker than it was, probably even a couple of years ago with Maresca. No frontline strikers of top quality. Jamie Vardy was the top scorer last year. It was the end of an era for him moving on. Probably rightly so at his age. Maybe could have done a job in the Championship again. You don't know. Kelechi Iheanacho obviously out on loan the second half of last year and gone. And then even looking down the score sheet, the likes of Buonanotte, who was the joint second top scorer, was only a loan player. Even popping up with a couple, the like of El Canous, who's now been heavily linked with a move away. There is an awful lot that is going to need to be done for Marti Cifuentes to build this side into that attacking outlet that he wants. And you do wonder whether he's going to end up with the same problem as at QPR, where he had this very solid team overall, but didn't have the person who could put the ball in the net. And in the end, that ended up costing him a chance at a top half and a playoff finish. For Leicester, of course, the aim will be much higher. The ambitions will be far greater. But I mentioned QPR's record last season, and we go back to it again, because we talk about Leicester and that awful home record and run they had under Ruud Van Nistelrooy without winning or scoring. And now you go and look at QPR last year. Their away form was actually top 6 in the Championship. Yes, it was a low scoring away from home team overall. 27 points from 23 games. Shouldn't have been the 6th best record, but it was. But their home record, the 4th worst in the division, one of only 4 teams not to pick up 30 points at home. Scored 31 goals at home, but conceded 34, which was one of the worst records in the Championship. In fact, only levelled by Norwich and worsened by Plymouth. And then you go and look at the other side of things. Away from home, weren't scoring a great deal. Didn't concede quite as many, set up a bit more cautiously, but again, didn't have that counter-attacking quality, which perhaps Leicester City do have to help him out. Of course, there are still attacking talents at the club and people that could score goals at Championship level. But of course, that depth isn't quite the same as it was a couple of years ago when they came up as champions under Maresca. If we go and have a look at Leicester City as a whole as well, last season, their problem was certainly stopping the goals going in at the back. 80 conceded as well as less than a goal a game scored. It does make it incredibly difficult to see how quick this turnaround is going to be. And without a full pre-season as well, you do fear that, unlike the Maresca situation, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get that flying start. But there's still some very good players at Leicester City. Of course, we've seen there's a little bit of talk about people potentially leaving, people potentially going to be moving on, and maybe 1 or 2 coming in. But there are still good players in that Leicester team. Yes, a few that have got bridges to build either with the fan base or with their teammates. But they've got top players at Championship level when it comes to midfield, when it comes to defence. They've got a solid goalkeeper for now. And up front, look, there are still good players in this squad. Fatawu, Mavididi, Bobby Reed and Jordan Ayew had experience. Patson Daka, will he ever get going? If he does, could be an asset for the club. There are good players in this squad. but are there the consistent attacking ones that have proven they can put the ball in the net? I would imagine Jordan Ayew will pop up with a fair few at championship level, but again, it is going to be a difficult situation. What we've got to look at though, for the first time in any of these manager specials this summer, is that it's come after the fixtures announcements. And that's pretty important as well, because we talk about it might take Leicester a little while to hit the ground running. We talk about the fact that Cifuentes has lost a bit of pre-season. Is it going to be a slower build into the year? And then you look at the fixtures and you say, well, actually, can it afford to be? I mean, there's no doubt in Leicester have actually been pretty decent in pre-season so far against both Leuven and Peterborough. However, I'm looking into August and you look at the early fixtures. I know that a couple of them are very strong this year and have a lot of financial backing, but on paper, Leicester play all of the three promoted sides before the end of September, and two of those three are at home under the lights. They've also got sides that in Sheffield Wednesday, Preston and Oxford are all among the relegation favourites for very different reasons. Swansea at the start of October with an inexperienced manager. The same for West Brom at the end of September, whose manager has never had a permanent senior job. So we're talking about a start to the season where, bar maybe Coventry at home who were in the playoffs last year, they're going to be all games that Leicester fans will be looking at and expecting to win. Add that they've got a League One side who have been investing heavily in the League Cup first round. It could be a sink or swim situation for Marti Cifuentes, because we're talking about a start to the season where they're expecting to do really well. And even if you go into October after that international break, Pompey and Hull just avoided relegation last year. Millwall were mid-table, albeit did very well towards the end. It's only really when you get to November that they start to have a lot of those really tricky games back to back, and then have an East Midlands derby, and then have some of the bigger sides over the Christmas period, including the other two that got relegated in late November and early December. So really that first 3 months of the season on paper is, as a side coming down, if you were stable, if you were steady, and if you were in good nick, is exactly what you would want, because you would hope you could get off to a flyer. And my worry is for Marti Cifuentes, the way that those fixtures have fallen, and with some of the uncertainty with certain players, and as I mentioned, the inconsistency with some of that front line, which I do think Bobby Reid and Jordan Ayew will help with. Bobby Reid has been in this situation before. I think that that's going to be the big test for Cifuentes. If he gets through to the end of October and Leicester are in a good position, they've picked up some good results, they're playing well, they're entertaining the fans, I actually think he's going to have a really good spell here. He's proven he can be a good coach. He's been sought after in various jobs before. We talk about the fact that he did okay at QPR, but did a really good job at Hammarby back in Scandinavia before, and he previously in Denmark as well, and has also managed elsewhere and done a good job in like the Spanish lower leagues, for example. So he is a coach who has got experience of different climates, has adapted to different situations and different clubs. And to be honest, even if he does have that awful start, if the board don't panic and give him time, which we didn't see with Cooper last year, but we know he can ride those situations out. He came into a really rotten situation at QPR where they'd gone through 3 or 4 managers in a year. They'd had that really difficult situation. They'd started the season terribly, and he built them up really well to actually finish pretty comfortably safe with a couple of games to go. So I wonder if he's going to be able to do the same again. He can't get involved with all of the stuff behind the scenes and what is and isn't going to happen on charges front and with the club outside of the football pitch. But there's no doubt that even if you take away your confidence in someone scoring as many as a Vardy, there is still a very good side here at Leicester. Even if they lose 2 or 3 more, they've got a squad that should compete at this level. So when you combine that with the fact that we've talked about it before, it's not a bad championship to come into. Obviously, Leeds, one of those sides they were competing with a couple of years ago, have gone up. The other 2 in Southampton and Ipswich have come back down. Southampton, as we've discussed with so many of the manager specials this year, have gone for people who have either got no championship experience or no managerial experience. Will Still's never managed in England. Look at West Brom with Ryan Mason. Never been a senior manager other than a few caretaker games with Tottenham Hotspur. There are so many up there as well. Norwich City, really the only exceptions with Liam Manning. And now Leicester have fallen into that as well, because while he's not got hundreds and hundreds of championship games under his belt, Marti Cifuentes has managed the best part of 2 championship seasons. He's approaching 100 championship games as a manager. We've mentioned it before, but I think this is going to be a season where a lot of gambles have been taken. There are going to be a lot of early managerial changes. I think there's going to be some surprise teams up in that top 6 mix, and maybe some you don't expect having poorer starts under these new managers. But I would argue that Leicester have gone for one of the safer options out of them, which is not what they did with Maresca 2 years ago, incidentally. We know that all of the talk at Leicester had been about a few different names, but most of them were experienced Championship managers. We mentioned Danny Roll before. We mentioned other people that have been talked about for the role. Even Chris Wilder got a mention at one point, didn't he? And Leicester have gone for that sort of proven Championship route, which I think this summer isn't the worst idea. He's a manager that, while wasn't doing so at QPR, has been used to clubs where he's been expected to win games every week. And I think if he can get off to a good start, despite the fact he's not going to get all of pre-season, which is still leaving an element of doubt in my mind, I think it could be a good season for Leicester. Ultimately, I think they've got a squad that will and should be in the top 6. It's just then whether they become a top 2 side or not. And that's the hard thing because of the uncertainty with them off the pitch and with some of the other clubs and the managers they've gone for. If I had to stick my neck on the line now, I would say I think Leicester will be in the top 2 at the end of the year if they are on an even playing field with no points deductions, etc. and no further transfer punishments, whatever else. I think that Leicester City would be able to get into the top 2 under Marti Cifuentes. Top 6 for sure. But can he get that positive start? Because I do fear if they have a slow one, the people may turn and it may become a very sticky situation. That's just my opinion though. We normally ask at the end of these episodes, will a manager see out his contract? Well, generally Leicester have given managers time before, but maybe in this situation it's going to be quite difficult. Cifuentes has shown he's happy to look at interest elsewhere at other clubs and leave if need be, as he did with QPR. We also know that the Championship is an unforgiving league, and we're now down to a single handful of managers who started their last season at the club. So it's not going to get easier to be a Championship manager. But Marti Cifuentes, he's got a chance here. He's got a good squad. He's got a good situation to go into. It's just about that lack of pre-season and what other players leave the club for me. In terms of Leicester's success, I think top 6 is nailed on. I think top 2, depending on the rest of the window, is a very strong possibility. But it doesn't matter what I think, does it? Leicester City fans, what do you make of this appointment? What do you think of your season ahead? Do you think promotion is a certainty again, or is it going to be more difficult this time around? Are you worried like me about the little bit of a lack of a goal threat, or do you think that will be sorted before the summer ends? Let me know down in the comments below. If you're another Championship fan, what do you make of this appointment? Is it safer because it's a man with more Championship experience? Or does it not matter when they've not been battling at the top end? Let us know what you think if you're one of the so-called promotion rivals in pre-season. But don't get too complacent. Luton Town were in that bracket last year. We all know that can go wrong. If you did enjoy this one, a little look at Marti Cifuentes being appointed Leicester City manager on a 3-year deal. Please do chuck a thumbs up on it. It's a massive season ahead, so subscribe and turn that notification bell on to make sure you don't miss a thing. We are back in just a few weeks' time to get going with our score predictions from the Championship every single weekend. 46 match days will be here for all of them. Come and get involved and play along as always. Before then, no, we are back in a week and a half's time to look ahead to the League One and League Two seasons with our pre-season predictions. Myself and Craig will guide you through those before the Championship and the National League the following week. So hopefully you'll come and join us for those. Thank you so much for watching as always. All the other Championship manager specials from this summer are up in the eye above. We'll see you again in just a few days' time as the FL 25-26 season is well and truly on the horizon.